So the lesson today, we're going to talk a little bit because this is the 10-year anniversary of those tragic events that occurred in the city of New York, downtown Manhattan. And so I do want to kind of talk about that a little bit. We don't want to just kind of blaze over it and just not really focus on those things because it did affect everyone. I don't think there's a time where maybe you even visit the site or you go around, individuals that were directly affected that they don't ask you, or sometime in your point in life you were asked, where were you at that time? Like, how did you find out about it? What were you doing? I remember directly, I was beginning my sophomore year of college, and I was going to class, showed up in class, nobody was in class. I was like, what is going on? So, in college, 15 minutes, right? Y'all give the teacher 15 minutes, and then you head back to wherever doing what you do. Went back to my apartment at the time, and my roommate was sitting there watching it on television. I can directly remember that the radio was my alarm clock at the time, so it would go off in the morning, and I thought maybe it was just a little staticky. But what was happening was they were reporting it. I can remember thinking like, oh, that's what it was. And so I think everyone remembers the time and maybe even the feeling that they had during those times, those things that came up within them. A lot of individuals, because I was in college, I had a lot of people that were around the age of joining the military. And I can remember some individuals going and joining the military directly after that because they knew that we were going to war. That's how strongly they felt about the situation that occurred. So there are a lot of feelings. There's a lot of things that can draw up, a lot of things that can be brought up during tragic times like that. So I think the lesson today that we're going to talk about, if you guys are big on keeping titles of lessons, it's the lesson of forgiveness. Mm-hmm. The lesson of forgiveness. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. Amen? Amen. So that's the title of the message today. Amen. So we're going to start over at Genesis chapter 37. If you have your Bibles. Please turn to Genesis chapter 37. And I'll be jumping around here a little bit, but we're going to start over at verse 3 in Genesis chapter 37. And we'll cover a lot of information. And so what I do want you to do is try to stay with me as far as what I'm trying to cover and convey, because I think this is a very important message for the church as it is today. Because what I believe as the state of the church is changing, in these times we have a lot of turmoil, there's a lot of things that are occurring, and we all believe that we all understand that these things occur in the spiritual realm before they manifest themselves in the physical. Amen? And so what you have to understand is that God has already got it under control. What we need to understand is what is our part in understanding what we need to do in order to move forward. And I think this lesson of forgiveness is going to be a big thing, because today we're going to cover the life of Joseph. If you guys are familiar with Joseph, he is one of the 12 sons of Israel. Amen. That comprise, I guess, the 12 tribes of Israel, as you kind of understand a little bit about that. But Joseph, he was a young man at the time where this account is taking place, when he starts off as a young man in his father's house. And so we do want to kind of cover and just look at the life of Joseph and look at a little bit about what he had to go through. And then we'll understand a lot more about what forgiveness really is. Because oftentimes when we say we forgive someone, it's almost a false type of forgiveness. We may say, well, I forgive you, and we kind of let it go. But what we have to understand is that if you truly have not allowed that person to be forgiven in your heart, it manifests itself as a cancer. It can eat away at the very fabric of your life. If you allow the unforgiveness in your life to manifest and to fester in your heart. And the reason why I'm even talking about this today is because, the way the United States of America is changing, you understand that right now the troops are coming back. There are plans for that to start occurring. And so what we will end up with in the churches are individuals that have spent a lot of their life, maybe even the last 10 years, basically in a state of unforgiveness, a state of hate for their enemy. They've been overseas, they fought the enemy, they've seen death occur right in front of their faces. Sometimes, it's been someone that they truly cared about, one of their close comrades in war. And so what we have to understand is that this lesson is going to be even more important, that we convey this and teach this to others individuals that are having a hard time with forgiveness. Amen. So we're going to start over at verse 3. Amen. And like I said, Joseph started out in his father's house, okay? All right. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. One night, Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. Amen? And so, what you have to understand is that Joseph, he's been given special ability. And I'm going to summarize as much as I possibly can so that everyone can be on the same page. But Joseph has been given a special gift by God, this ability to dream and then interpret dreams. And so when Joseph has this dream, he goes on to interpret this dream as one day my brothers and my mother and my father will one day bow down to me. He didn't understand exactly what that meant. He didn't know when it was going to occur. He didn't have any of the foreknowledge about that information, but he just knew it was in his dream. It's almost where sometimes you can go and you can share information with your brothers and sisters. You can go share information with those that are closest to you, your loved ones. And oftentimes you might feel that you're safe in doing that. I know, my family were close enough where maybe if I told them something that was occurring in my life, I got a raise, I got a new job, I bought a new house, I have a new car, I have, those type of things. I can convey that to them and they would be approved. They would definitely rejoice with me. Amen? Amen. But sometimes you have to understand that the haters are even in your own house. Because oftentimes there are things that occur within a family or even within a job situation where other individuals become competitive with one another. They feel that there's not enough to go around, so they sometimes resent what's going on in your life if it's a positive thing. We often term this term jealousy. That's right. And so people become jealous and envious of you, even in a point where it may be in your own family. And that's a sad thing to say sometimes because sibling rivalry occurs so often. We hear about it on the news all the time. Brothers killing brothers, sisters, killing sisters, stealing their husbands, and all kinds of mess like that. But it's a very real thing. It's something that occurs on a regular basis. And even in Joseph's time, where his brothers hated him enough, where they wanted to actually kill him. They didn't just, oh, look at that boy. They wanted to kill him. They wanted him gone. Because he was the favorite of his father. If you understand the relationship that he had with his father, he was, at the time, the Bible doesn't really denote if he was the youngest born at the time, because he was the youngest, he was one of the younger sons. He was the 11th born of the 12. But at the time the Bible speaks about, and you'll see a little bit later, he had a younger brother named Benjamin. And Benjamin, we don't know if he was born or if he was young, or we don't really know, but by the time that he did see him a little bit later on, he did know who he was and did recognize him. So we kind of maybe think that maybe he was a little younger. But if you look at that, if you look at it, he was one of the younger ones. He also was one of the wives of his father's favorite. His favorite wife, one of his favorite wives. He had one wife. You understand? If you go back and do your research a little bit, you're looking at the life of Jacob, and Jacob was a trickster. you know, how he was living in his father-in-law's house and was, you know, basically he was duped